Hello, this is Kevin Benedict reporting live from Atlanta, Georgia today, where I have the opportunity to be here with Scott Lewin. And Scott is a longtime expert in the e-invoicing space. And since we've both shared a common experience in e-invoicing in our careers, and we've had the opportunity to sit here, I thought we'd just ask you some questions, Scott. You game?
Sounds good. Sounds good. It's good to see you again,
Yeah,
Kevin.
thank you. So Scott, you've been in the industry for a long time. And e-invoicing has continued to evolve and change in different ways in different places of the world. Why don't you summarize kind of for the listeners and viewers today, what have you seen over the last 5 years, let's say, in the electronic invoicing world, and how's it changed?
Sure. E-invoicing throughout the world is really, really hot. That means that more and more countries are seeing electronic invoice adoption. More and more countries are actually pushing and mandating electronic invoicing. In Europe, the electronic invoicing is not yet mandated by the government. It's more of a relationship between customer and supplier. But in Latin America, it is mandatory. And Latin America is really driving the entire e-invoicing world with process and with compulsory mandates, meaning you can't do business in that region unless you can comply with electronic invoicing regulations.
What's behind electronic invoicing? Why are governments embracing this and mandating it?
Sure, it's pretty simple. It's all about collecting taxes. In Latin America, you have value-added taxes, and what they need to do is reduce the potential for fraud. So companies who report an invoice, they want to make sure that amount matches the company that receives the invoice. So if you send an invoice for 1,000 pesos, it needs to be received as 1,000 pesos. So it really squeezes the ability to have fraud within the tax base.
So Scott, you have expertise in global e-invoicing. What makes Latin American e-invoicing different from perhaps Europe and other regions?
Well, Latin America has tackled this head on, and they've decided that this is a way for us to reduce the ability for leakage in the tax base. Other countries are looking at Latin America and are slowly following their process. For example, Brazil has been the leader and the most progressive in its process. Mexico recently has started following some of the Brazilian processes. Argentina is moving in that direction. Guatemala is moving in that direction, which means you can't just send an invoice. You actually have to send it first to the government to be validated, and then it sends back to you, and then you can send it out to your trading partner. On the converse, when you receive an invoice, you can't just pay it. You have to send it to the government so they can make sure the amount you received is exactly the amount that was sent to them originally. And so the government's comparing outbound invoices with inbound invoices and making sure the totals match.
So I have a background in IT. I come from e-commerce and B2B e-commerce background, did a lot of EDI and e-invoicing. That sounds like a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, and it's extremely complex because that's a real-time process. You can't have goods sitting on your shipping docks waiting for a validated invoice. It has to happen as quick as a credit card transaction. And then you have to integrate with different pieces of the government for different types of invoices. So it is an extremely complex process, and to add one more layer of complexity, it's a changing process. So the rules are changing at least yearly in each market, sometimes more than once a year, and companies really have to think about how they're going to meet these requirements.
So when the governments mandate and they have a date, are they really being strict about it?
They are being more and more strict. They have realized you can't just say e-invoicing and have 10 million companies adopted January 1st. They've staggered some of the mandated dates. They've staggered some of the requirements, but they are very serious. And if you don't do that, not only can it be a fiscal issue, it can be a criminal issue.
So what are the top 3 factors a company should look at when they're, well, even before I get to that question, I'm going to stop and go back, and I'm going to say, how do they an average company support this? Do they build an on-premise solution? Do they bring in a lot of consultants? Can they outsource this to some cloud-based platform or software as a service model? What are the options?
Sure, all of those are options, and all of those have pluses and minuses. When you look at bringing all of this in-house and supporting it, it's a massive effort. Imagine bringing in an application that needs to support a process that's constantly changing. Perhaps all of the requirements are in a language you're not familiar with. It is a very big issue. Also, it relies on the software vendor to continuously update their solution in order to meet these changing requirements. So more and more companies are moving away from on-premise solutions to SaaS solutions.
And SaaS being software as a service.
Software as a service. They're looking at finding experts in the market who monitor this as part of their daily business and provide solutions that meet these changing requirements without having to make massive changes to their infrastructure.
So are there any other reasons that companies would go, I know it's a lot of work, but are there other reasons and benefits for going to software as a service?
It's very difficult to support these processes. So you need dedicated teams internally within each country if you're going to support this yourself. So we've seen many larger companies go down this road only to say, stop, we've got to find a better way. Smaller companies really don't even have that option because they don't have the staffing to support this.
Got it. Well, Scott, I want to thank you so much for sharing with us today, and this is the first in a series of interviews we're going to do with you on different aspects and components of e-invoicing. So thank you for sharing today.
Good. Always glad to see you, Kevin.